Well, hello, friends, and we are here today and excited with another installment of Kidney Talks with the Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Kendrick Curry of the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and we have our other co-hosts from the Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, as well as George Washington University, which is Dr. Keith Melanson, as well as the Minority Organ Tissue Transplant and Education Program, which is MOTEP, and that's Dr. Clive Callender. We're excited today about hearing from two individuals who will give us a wonderful story of organ donation and law enforcement. So I'd like to bring our guest on out and let's see how things go. So we welcome Mr. Peter Ford and also Mr. Michael Foster to our wonderful program. And I just understand that there's a story to be told between you two. Please start.
Yeah. Peter, go first. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'll go first because it's sort of started with me. And Dr. Reverend Curry, if I go too long, just let me know. But it's sort of interesting, right? And it's a little bit out of the ordinary, for me. But I was doing a workout at the gym during lunch, and I call it the gentleman's workout. Not too strenuous. And I was listening to some TED Talks, trying to get smart when I was working out. And all of a sudden, this guy got on there, and well, let me back up. I always wanted to give back to the police, right? I wanted to say thank you, especially to the patrol officers, because to me personally, I think that's the hardest job in America, especially right now, but it's a very hard job. And I wanted to say thank you. And I didn't have the time or just some of the other energy, but I kept saying, for 6 months, a year, how can I give back, right? Besides going to the National Police Week, where they go in the mall and they have the candles and things like that. And so I kept thinking about it. And then I was doing my workout and I saw a TED Talk, and there was a person about my age, right, that got on there, and he talked about donating a kidney, which was totally from my mind. And I literally sat there. I'm like, well, maybe I could donate a kidney to a police officer, just like that. But then I said, well, I'll never make it because my spleen was removed when I was 8 years old. It was ruptured. And I said, I just won't make it, but I'll give it a shot. And then I started trying to find the process, and I went on Facebook and I went to the transplanting groups and all that. And I said, I'd like to donate to a police officer or his or her family, immediate family. And they wrote back, the administration folks of it, and they're probably saying, who is this guy? And they said, it's never been done before. You can't do it. And I think, Dr. Melanson, this is, we're talking about volunteers and kidney donors. I stepped back for about a month and a half, 2 months. I said, well, I gave it a shot, right? I mean, this is the misconnect right there, because I didn't think I could do this. And then all of a sudden I was thinking, let me go a little bit harder. And I've had a couple knee operations from George Washington. It's a pretty darn good hospital. And I just went on their website and I put in kidney donation. And Dr. Melanson's Transplant Institute came up. I'm like, oh, I got an institute. Let me call them up. And it was, I talked to Helena and she said, yeah. I said, I don't have a spleen. She says, well, that's not something that prevents you from giving it. So you could go ahead and give it a shot. So I did the preliminary test and I was like, whoa, I made it. And then I kept going in. And then I told the doctors, I said, I was in the State Department. I got really sick in Sudan, really sick in Mauritania. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this. Well, all the tests came back. I mean, they did some really cool stuff. And half the, I want to say fun, but it was so interesting to see all the stuff they did. And it was very in depth. And I kept going along and I'm like, oh, I'm a lot healthier than I thought. Checked absolutely everything. And then I think it was last April or May, right? Michael, we talked about it. They said, oh, you're a candidate, which, I didn't know if I should be happy or nervous or, I did my little hands in the air. I'm like, yes, I got it. But then it came down to trying to find a match. And I like I said, my only parameters was, it's not like I'm a nice guy. I wanted to say thank you to the police. And this was my way of doing it. I don't know who it was, but, and then I've just waiting. And I never deviated, Dr. Melanson or Reverend Curry, from where I was going. the Institute was great because they said you could always back out at the last second. Don't ever feel pressured. We want to make the operation when you want to do it. So I had a wedding I had to go to. Sorry, Michael, I had to delay it a month, but it was, I mean, it was not easy process, but very in depth. That's pretty detailed answer.
Okay.
I think that's an amazing answer and part of a story. So, Michael, why don't you share a little bit about how the stories dovetail together?
Okay. Well, first of all, Peter, I think you're more than a nice guy. I think you're a great guy. We'll get into that later. So I was diagnosed with kidney disease in 2018, and I immediately went to, no, let me backtrack. I was diagnosed in 2018 with kidney disease, and I didn't think anything of it. I just kept doing what I was doing. I collapsed at my job in 2020, went to the hospital, spent 5 days at Holy Cross by myself because it was during the time of COVID and you couldn't have any visitors. I immediately started with dialysis that Monday, 3 days straight, found a center and started my dialysis. And I was on for 2.5 years, where normally people are on anywhere between 5 to 10. And with my blood type, it could be even longer while you're waiting for a donor. But they said I was healthy enough where I could receive a kidney donation. So I was like, fine. So I tried a couple of centers, and one never called back. One I tried with them, went through the process, was deemed a viable candidate, but there was always a problem with the testing and payment. So the other one, I had gotten so downtrodden with the whole process, I just said, never mind. So I kind of basically just aligned myself to the fact that I would be on dialysis forever until someone passed away and I was able to receive their kidney. Lo and behold, I think it was in March of 2022, and someone from GW came to the center, and my social worker there said, why don't you try talking to them? And I said, I'm not interested. I just don't want to do it. She said, look, just go ahead and talk to them. I think you'll be okay. So I did. And she said that someone would call me back within the next 2 weeks. Well, 7 days later, someone called and said, okay, well, we're going to start you with this process. So I had the interview. I guess I, impressed them enough where they said, okay, well, let's go in for testing. So I started with the test, and one day I was talking to my transplant coordinator. Her name was Sharon Glass. And we were friendly enough towards each other. We had a nice conversation. And I just happened to mention what I did for a living, being a police officer. And she got really excited. She says, oh, no, wait, hold on one second. She threw the phone down, went in the back, and she was shuffling papers. I could hear it. I'm like, what's going on? She comes back to the phone and she says, you were a police officer, right? I said, yeah. She said, well, there are people that like to donate to police officers, firefighters, and the military. We may have a candidate that may suit what you're looking for. I was like, okay, fine, great. And this was in April. And coincidentally, that was the month that Peter found out that he was a viable candidate to donate. So went through the process, completed all the tests, and I'm good to go. Now, there was one particular CT scan, and I'll never forget this. Someone called me from GW. I don't know her. I didn't get her name. She said, you need to schedule a test. I said, okay, fine. Gave her a date. Couldn't make that date. I called, rescheduled, made another date. Couldn't make that date. So I called, rescheduled for a third date. Didn't make, and I completely forgot about it and I missed it. I called Sharon and told her. She was livid. She said, well, they're going to think that you're not really interested in this. Da, da, da. Let me see what I can do, blah, 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 blah. So now I'm like, oh my God, I think I've missed my shot. Now, and I haven't told anybody this before. The leader of my union, the Teamsters, and a small contingent went to Rome to have an interview with the Pope. So they did the thing, and before they left, I spoke to a lady that I had to take to get her passport. And I said, you guys are going to see the Pope, right? She said, yeah. I said, do me a favor. And I was kind of joking when I said it. Say a prayer for me, if you please, and have him, do whatever. She said, I would. And they did. So they came back maybe 5 days later, and they gave me a gift from the Pope. And they said, yeah, we said a prayer, blah, blah, blah. He said a prayer for you. I was like, oh, great. Thank you so much. Later that afternoon, I called Sharon. No, I'm sorry. Sharon called me. She said, Mr. Foster, I apologize for what happened the other day, but I checked and you've already had the CT scan test. So I don't know who it was you spoke with, but you're good to go. I said, so I didn't miss any time. She said, no. I was like, great. And she said, oh, and by the way, you're scheduled for transplant on October 11th. So I was like, you're kidding. And she said, no. So I said, okay, fine. Still didn't really believe it. So went through the process. And then I found out through Dr. Serrano in early September that there was and I knew this, there was a mass on my left kidney. They were concerned because it had gotten larger. So they said they wanted to do a nephrectomy, which is the removal of that kidney. So they scheduled that for September 14th, which would have given me enough time to heal for the transplant date. So I went in and I had the exact same procedure that Peter went through in the removal of the kidney, and he performed it. So I healed up and everything was good to go. And on October 11th, I got my kidney from Peter.
That's a powerful story. And when
see, the
you
Pope
combine,
thing got that really got me too.
that's a powerful story. So, I have to note the divine intervention in the midst of all of this, because prayer does work.
Exactly.
It's very interesting to me about how you two have been connected. And Michael, I'd like you to just remind those that are here, how long was it between your diagnosis and the receipt of the kidney that you had? How much time passed?
From initially finding out that I had the disease until I received the kidney, I would say almost 4 years.
Okay.
Now, from the time from dialysis receiving, the start of dialysis to receiving was 2.5.
I got you. And Peter, how long ago did you decide that this was a thing you wanted to do in terms of giving a kidney?
You mean when I actually said,
yes.
Well, I wanted to help the police, and I guess when I was going through it, and one of the docs, when I was ready to go, to be frank, I mean, it's, I'm a little bit old. I'm 62, just for the folks out there. I thought I was too old, right? That was another factor. They said, no, you're good to go. I had all these factors in my mind. I'll never make it. And then I was getting in it. I said, well, I'm pretty healthy, right? And you're talking about, I want to give back. I have been blessed with good health, right? Because it's really hard to, get all this stuff. But then you want to make sure that the doctor that's, doing this, organizing this is good to go. So Dr. Melanson, I think, I don't know, a year and a half ago, he and I talked, and, he studied up in Minnesota. I'll be frank, right? I clicked with him.
Okay.
And then I didn't tell anybody for the whole year that I was doing this. You should have been with my family when I had that conversation that, hey, I'm already approved. I'm ready to, because I didn't want anybody to talk me out of it. I just wanted to focus. So I didn't tell anybody. And of course, everybody's like, well, who's the doctor? And then Dr. Melanson, he's done a lot of these, videotapes or whatever you want to call them, podcasts and all. And we kept bringing him up. And I think he's good. I think he's great. I think he's got the whole idea. I had no idea that this affected so many people, right? Because, and then, so I guess about, 6 months ago? I'd say about a year ago, 14 months ago, I was just, once I decided to do it, I was ready to go.
Good. And have there been any side effects or any things that you had to deal with, Peter or Michael, since the transplant?
I guess I'll start here because I was a federal police officer with the State Department, Diplomatic Security, 32 years, and spent a lot of time.
That's important.
It's the family, right? It's all the family, but it's risk management I've been dealing with. Now there's a high impact. There's a in terms of probability, you could get, the consequences could be, death, but the probability is very small.
Sure.
And how I wanted to help outrode that a lot.
Wow.
So for me, there was no issues. Since I went in, I had all the great tests. I had the operation. I think I was there 3 or 4 days. I can't remember exactly. This true story. I had it October 11th, October 31st, and this is where Dr. Melanson, Dr. Serrano aren't probably too happy with me. On the 31st of October, I had a couple people lift me into a rowing boat down there in the Potomac, and I was out on the water, and I haven't had any issues, or I drink a lot more water now. I'll say that, which is probably better anyway.
Yeah,
that's good. So, what age again were you when you donated?
I was 61.
Wow. I hope our audience heard that. Yeah,
61.
That's what a blessing. And Michael, what age were you when you got this transplant?
55.
Wow. See, there's hope, and not only in your faith, but there's also credible scientists associated with it, and doctors in particular. And Dr. Melanson, what do you think about this wonderful story that you had a chance to participate in?
Well, Reverend, and I know you've heard me say this before, but this is, further evidence that I have the best job on the planet. You might have,
I get it.
You got the second best job, but I got the best job.
You tell God that, but that's okay.
No, but I'm good with God. I'm good with God too. No. Yeah. But this is what, we're Christians, but I think talking about the presence of God, this man, Peter Ford, who, I tell everybody, our nickname for him was 007 because, this man comes in, I meet him in my clinic. He's in his 60s, but physiologically, he's a lot younger. He's in great shape. He's taking good care of himself. And, he has this great family. He raised his kids. And what does he want to do? Does he want to go off in the sunset and retire and just sip margaritas on the beach? No, this man says, I want to save someone's life, right? And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about having the best job on the planet. I get to meet people like this, right? I get to meet people like Mr. Foster, who is at a down point, right? He is dealing with something that he didn't think he was going to have to deal with in life, right? Life has given him a curveball, and he sees the downside. Where is the upside? He's clutching to hold on to his blessings, but it's going to be depressing when you get to your 50s and you've done everything right and you've worked hard. You've been a police officer. You're supposed to be going off to your towards retirement and being healthy. And he saw everything kind of turn around on him. And so for me, to be a little bit like a conduit and bring these two guys together, it was just an absolutely beautiful thing to see. And like Mr. Foster said, it was like divine intervention. I've seen this happen before, but every time I see it, it's an absolute miracle. Because Mr. Ford, when he comes forward, I knew he was a good donor, but I wasn't expecting him to say, I need this to go to a police officer. I wasn't expecting, I didn't even remember that Mr. Foster was a police officer. And I remember that day, Foster talked about this. Sean comes running in my office and was like, I got it. And I'm like, I remember, I think I was on the phone and I looked up at Sean and I thought, she's going crazy. What is wrong with this woman? And, but she was so excited. And, that's the great thing about, it's not just my team, but I think people that are involved in transplant, in order to do this stuff, you have to drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, right? You got to have the passion, because the job doesn't make sense unless you have the passion. And I just love the fact that this coordinator, this nurse, was so excited because she felt like she was going to solve this puzzle, right? Foster needed a transplant. Ford was a great donor. We just needed them all to match up. And of course, the Hollywood story is he wind up being a great match for this donor, Mr. Ford. And then it all worked out. One of the things you got to get him to talk about is, when we bring them into the hospital, this is what's called a non-directed donation. So Mr. Foster knew he had a donor, but he didn't know who the donor was. Mr. Ford knew his kidney was going to someone. He knew the person was a police officer, but he didn't know who particularly he was, right? We do everything anonymous. Everyone is sworn to secrecy in the hospital. So Mr. Ford and his family can't know Mr. Foster and his family, because when you're doing these things anonymously, when you're doing these non-directed donors, you don't want someone to see someone and go, oh, really? That's who my kid is going to? You just want to keep everything secret. So that's how we brought them in. We brought them in, and they were in the same place, but it was all secret. But I'll let them tell the story because, like I said, they're not supposed to know each other, but things can happen. So why don't you start, Mr. Ford? Tell them about this secret enterprise that we had to try to run.
I probably shouldn't even say this joke, but I want to say that we kept this secret a lot better than U.S. government keeps their secrets. I'm a government guy, but I'm not a government guy anymore. But that is true. And, it's funny you said it, because I didn't know. And Dr. Malangsong, now that I've delved into this, right? I mean, I first was like, well, how come? And I totally understand. And it's so fair because people back out, right? They get a little bit nervous, and you don't want to say, oh, I saw that person. It doesn't, absolutely not. I did not want to know, but we did sort of like that old book called I Spy. It was like every time come to your office, we're like, all right, do you think that the recipient's here? And I don't know if I walked by Michael or I was sitting down. One time I thought I was sitting next to him, but it wasn't. It was a fun, but still it was sort of interesting time. I didn't know anything.
It was close. We're going to the center for, I don't even remember why we were there, but I think it was a couple of days before. And we were on the 8th floor. And I walk out into the area, I guess the vestibule area where the elevator is. And a guy had already walked past, and I was with somebody from the clinic, and I looked at the guy and I was like, "It's something about him. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about this guy." So I asked. I said, "Is that my donor right there?" She said, "No," and completely changed the subject. So I was like, "Okay." But then I stopped and I looked at him again. And I was like, I don't know, but all right, whatever. So have the transplant. And then the day of the transplant, my wife is in the waiting area. Peter's wife was sitting maybe, I think she said 10 seats away. And my wife had this feeling as well. And she just kept looking at this lady and looking at this lady. And she could tell she was worried, but she never said anything. And then I think Dr. Serrano came out. She gets up and she says, he's fine. He's in recovery, blah, blah, blah. And we're ready now to, do the transplant. And I think my wife, ended up, okay, I think that's him. But she wasn't sure. We didn't meet until November 8th. And the whole time afterwards, I would get really emotional. What am I going to say to this guy? What am I going to, how am I going to act? Da, da, da. And I just start crying and bawling. And I was really just so grateful that, whoever it is who didn't know me from Jack decided I want to do something to save his life. So we walk in on November 8th. We're in the clinic. They take me over to see him. And I think it's funny because they always tell you, be around as few people as possible. Okay, fine. So I masked up and we go through a door, go down in the hall, and I swear, there must have been 40 people in the hallway. And I'm just passing by each and every one of them. They're like, oh, great, congratulations. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get COVID. I know it. I'm gonna get COVID from these people. Oh my God. And then we walk into the room and I look straight in from the door, and Derek Ward from News 4 is there. And I was like, oh, okay, this is great. I look over to the right and there's Peter. And I'm like, do not cry, Mike. Do not cry. You better not cry. You better not. So I walk over to him and I held my hand out to shake his hand. He's like, we don't do handshakes here. And he gave me the biggest hug. And I was just like, oh, great. This is great. So
it was, we did do that. Yeah.
Huh?
And see, just for the audience out there, see, police officers, we do hug.
Wow.
Michael, for me, I was happy the whole time. The only time I got, teary-eyed, because, for me, it was my I don't know, duty, whatever. My wife and I were trying to figure out why I did it. But for me, it was all good, right? It was just, and then when I was talking, the time that hurt me, when I was talking to your son, and I didn't know you had a son, and we FaceTimed him. I FaceTimed my son. He didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to talk to the NFL football player. But, when we're talking to your son, and that's the one time, and he said, thank you. And I was like, oh, this really is not just you. It's like the whole, and I had no idea.
It was very surreal.
I remember the time you said, why'd you do it? Remember, I don't know if you remember that. You're to my left. You said, why'd you do it? Because you did. I thought you knew more than you knew, right? This is why I'm thinking the transplant center did a great, and they have to do a great job, right? Yeah. I mean, for all the people out there, it is like double secret probation and all that. And I said, well, we're the family and all that. We're same. And you looked at me sort of like, what? And I said, well, I was a federal police officer, but overseas dealing with embassy stuff. And then you went, I'll never forget. Oh, okay, now I get it. And anyway, that was a great day.
Let me explain to Reverend Curry. Just Reverend, when we brought them together, we kept everything top secret. The transplant went fine, and then we brought them to the clinic. And on the day we brought them to the clinic, we tied it in with a Washington Commanders football player who was visiting the hospital because he wanted to talk about all the great things that George Washington Hospital had done because he had gotten care there. So he was there. We told him that we had this pair that was going to be meeting. So he wanted to be a part of that. So, and then the one of the local news stations came by to cover everything. So all of that came together on the same day, and it was all filmed by the local news station. And it was just a great story. Yeah.
It was.
And Dr. Melancon was in front of the cameras. Tell the truth. No.
Well, some people are attracted to the cameras. It wasn't about me.
Such a wonderful.
But it is a selling point, because when I met him, right, I didn't don't know anything. And here I'm like, okay, I got to, this is like really serious business. I want it. And I literally checked when he was in that one cafe with this other group. And I think I've seen just about everything I could find online about him. And there is a lot. You're right, Reverend, but it helps sell his abilities. And I think, it's not only your abilities, right? I mean, you have to feel that connection, whatever that connection is, religiously, or, for me, it's all about reconciliation, right?
That's it.
With the police and the public and just the whole thing. So for me, it's much more deeper. And then just a little side note that I haven't really, I think, expressed to Michael or Dr. Melanson. If you're not involved in this, you're sort of hearing all about it. But I had no idea that I didn't know it was, I knew it was bad, but I had no idea how this dialysis and kidney failure affects the African-American community much more than anybody else. I didn't frankly know that till afterward and looking at some of all the stuff. I knew some of it, but now I've much more educated on it.
Yeah, Reverend, to bring what you do into this, these guys came together. It's kind of how you're involved in this as well, because it's like that story of when Jesus is at the well and this woman comes there and she didn't realize that she was going to be meeting her Savior on that day, right? It just, but he started, it's the longest conversation that he has with this woman who is from a different group. She's a Samaritan, right? But he could see inside who she was. And, what's inside Mr. Ford and what's inside Mr. Foster and what's inside Reverend Curry, all those things resonated. And that's the beauty of how all this came together. And that's what makes it divine inspiration, what like Mr. Foster talked about with the Pope. There was something beyond us that made all of this happen.
Right.
I'm doing a little preaching, Reverend Curry, if that's okay.
It's always okay for you to try to do some preaching. But I think, as I would say, the Lord has need of you in the area where you are.
Amen.
This is without question, a very profound story. It's a story that has so many pieces to it. It's a story within stories. Peter has his story and his own backstory and reason. Michael has his story and it's his need, and how all of this comes together with you, Dr. Melanson, so that we see people can be made whole through kidney transplantation. It's a spiritual thing that is a physical thing, that is a God thing, as well as an empathy, caring thing. Talk about, if you would, Michael and Peter, what it really means to be able to share and to care with someone that is part of your tribe, like those who are officers.
Go ahead, Michael. It's a heavy one.
It's extremely important. You can, do all the right things as far as what you think is concerned. You can eat right, you can exercise, you can get as much rest as you want, and you never know what's going to happen. And that was my story. I would work out. I would try to eat as right as I possibly thought I could. I got as much rest as I felt I needed, and probably because the only problem is I had high blood pressure. High blood pressure turned into kidney disease. It wasn't any fault of my own, and it was nothing that I could control. It just happened. So to tell other officers, people in law enforcement, if there's anybody in the community that may be experiencing this, yeah, it sucks, and yeah, there are going to be some bad days, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and all you have to do is really just keep to your faith, and eventually something good will happen to you. And I never, myself personally, I never got really depressed, maybe a couple of times, but nothing really, to the point where, I needed to seek professional help, because I knew at some point something was going to happen, something good. And it's funny, 2022, I deemed this was the year I was going to get a kidney. I didn't know how I was going to do it, didn't know when, didn't know who. Although my son, said he would. I had a few friends that said they would do it. Actually, one of my best friends from the police department, when he found out, he said, sign me up. Let me know what I need to do, and I'm there. If I can do it for you, I will. And that was great. But, keep to the faith, and, again, something good will happen to you. And I'm a living testament to that. And then also, they talk about angels here on earth. There are two right now that I know, Peter and Dr. Milan's son. I mean, again, Peter was the instrument. Well, Dr. Milan's son was the instrument, and Peter had the source for me. So again, keep your faith, and good things will happen.
Well, I think your story is one that will preach, and aspects of it about how two are knit together are just tremendous. I do invite those who are on YouTube or Facebook to really share your questions, because this is a powerful moment that shows empathy, that shows unusual kindness, that shows skill, that shows years of study, years of care, training. All sorts of things are embedded in this story, and we invite you to become part of it. What would you say, Peter, to those who are considering donation, and what would help them get over the finish line, if you will, of saying yes to donation?
It's there is probably a lot of people out there thinking about it. Since we do have a reverend on this show, and it's one part of me is I've been, Michael talked about it, health, right? It's not something you could eat well, but still bad things happen to good people. I've been blessed with good health, and O negative, by the way. So if you're O negative, you're much better than some of the other ones. And I have O negative, but I think you have to have a commitment. You got to feel comfortable. And what I did, Reverend, is I got all the information I could, because I didn't tell anybody. I didn't have anybody to talk to. I said, and I didn't want to be talked out of it, frankly. And I didn't think I had a shot, but I got so much information that when I came to my family, that was, like I said, an interesting conversation. I presented the facts, and the facts are the facts. And if you're getting a little bit later in life, or even earlier in life, until the people out there, and there are a lot of people out there, and you want to really help out, and sure, there is a slight possibility of risk, but there's a slight possibility of risk every time you drive a car. And the reality is, I'm back. I'll probably be, I got a nice scar. I'll probably be a little bit more healthy because I'm drinking more water, right? But the thing is if you want to give back, I think the ultimate thing, it's better than giving money. It's better than giving your time. And if you don't really have a lot of that, what you do have is an extra kidney. It sounds bad, but the technology's there. Dr. Milan's song is there. And just keep going. Just keep looking at it, and then get comfortable in the uncomfortable. Keep driving. And if you feel comfortable at the end, right? And I had a lot of discussions with myself. I said, go ahead, go for it. Look at all the numbers. Do Dr. Milan's song and Dr. Serrano. Outstanding folks. That's my recommendation. We're giving you a lot of sermons there, Dr. Curry.
That's why I'm here writing them down. I'm writing
Okay,
down.
good.
I'm writing down illustrations all the way around. Michael, I'm very much interested in, what would you say to those that now that you've experienced transplants, and some folk are still yet fearful, I know, in the African American community, and they don't want to do things until they absolutely positively have to. And there's a lot of fear and trepidation. And I'm just wondering what you could say to those listeners that will help them, you know, really hear what you did and the continuance of life that comes about it as a result of your transplant.
Don't do what I did.
Okay.
That's for one. Again, like I said, 2018, I was diagnosed, and I didn't think anything else about it. Don't wait to the absolute last minute, because again, like I said, I collapsed at work, went home the day after I was in the hospital, and again, I was in the hospital by myself for like 5 days. So, if you get the diagnosis, go to your doctor, you go to your nephrologist, and begin whatever regimen, whatever treatment plan that they need you to do. Please, I beseech you, do it. So I had a long road, but it really wasn't a long road when compared to other people. And I've seen other people at the dialysis center. I've seen 7 people pass away from the 2.5 years that I was there. But they had other, underlying factors. But again, just follow the program. As Peter says, and he says it all the time, trust the process, follow the regimen, do what you need to do. There are new medications out. It could probably, not prolong, but basically keep you from having to go to dialysis before you get a transplant. But I did it. I got the transplant, and recovery process for a recipient as opposed to a donor is actually a lot longer. I was really home for like 5.5 months before I was able to go back to work. But you'll notice your body getting stronger. You'll be able to do more. And the day that you're able to, really do the things that you want to do, it's freeing. It's like you get out of jail card. That's basically all I can say. And now, like I said, I'm thriving, and I love it. I love Peter. I love Dr. Melancon. I'm grateful to God for what he was able to do for me, and I'm just thankful every day.
That's just tremendous. Go ahead, Peter.
Reverend, I'm sorry, I had to jump in here. One other thing. For the donor side, I didn't know it was that hard for the recipient until I talked to Michael afterward, because even when I first met him, I didn't know. I said, can I meet this guy? And they said, well, do you want to? I said, yeah, I do, but I couldn't ask about how his health was because you don't do that, right? I mean, that's just, you give it and that's it, right? You don't know. And I met him, and it's great. And from the donor side, out there to the donors, right? Because your guys are the ones who got the goods. Just 6 weeks ago, I had a full hip replacement, and I'm back to go. And that's this is not too far from October. So just to let you know, from the donor side, it's really, I hate to say it, not as bad as you would think.
Dr. Melancon, what are your thoughts around, what we need to do to have more stories like this told so that we can increase donor populations, increase those that deal with early detection in terms of kidney disease that may need, so that we can deal with transplantation and detection?
Yeah, thanks. Great question, Reverend. And, I think more of what we're doing right here, because, in both of these guys are kind of perfect in extolling the message, because, look at Mr. Foster. This guy was not, like he said, he wasn't in bad health. He was doing pretty much what you would want a middle-aged person doing. He was living a good life, was trying to take good care of himself. But even with that, he wound up with kidney disease. He had a problem that's very, very common. He had high blood pressure. So I think the answer there is what he said, which is don't let these problems fester, right? You've got to get your blood pressure under control. As an African American person, we are at 3 to 4 times the risk of having kidney disease compared to a white person. And primarily that is because of poor control of two things: high blood pressure and diabetes, right? These are the two things that are taking out so many people. When Peter gave Michael his kidney, he wasn't just giving him a kidney. He wasn't just taking him off of dialysis. Peter gave Michael life. He gave him decades of life.
Yes.
Right? So what people out there in the cosmos need to understand is what you can do. Peter said it great. There's very little that any of us, even you, the great Reverend Curry, there's very little that any of us could do for any other human like what Peter did for Michael. He gave this man life. And that's what is so beautiful about this whole process. So out there, we have people like Michael that, and like you said, early detection. We need to be, all of us that are at risk. I mean, as you've heard before, Reverend Curry, my mom has cardiovascular disease. High blood pressure runs in my family. I take my blood pressure every morning. I'm very careful about what I eat. You have to be vigilant, because it can come and get you, right? This is out there. Even for people that are reasonably healthy, there can be kidney disease if you don't do what you need to do on your end. And then for other people that could be an angel like Peter Ford. I mean, you know this, Reverend. I know this in what I do. There's nothing more exhilarating than being able to really, really help people in a way that makes a difference. And there is no bigger difference than you can make in giving someone life, right? So Michael has all these years to thank Peter for, right? Because he's not on dialysis. He's been freed, just like, the people that came here in 1619. Right? He's been freed of the bonds of the dialysis machine. But more important than that is the length of his life. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that there's very little you can do that would equate what Peter did for Michael. And I hope that that's what resounds, is that people understand on the risk side what they need to be doing better. And then on the donation side, what a difference you could make in someone's life. There's so many horrible stories from shootings in schools and all these horrible things you can see on the news. But there needs to be more stories like this.
And that's exactly the point. Without question, that's exactly the point. More stories like this. This is phenomenal. It talks, yes, about new life. It talks about bonds that are built that are just special and unique, that will last for literally a lifetime. And I'm just so excited and happy for you all. My heart is filled with gratitude. And I know, Michael and Peter, you have mutual admiration. Michael, surely there's gratitude for Peter. And Peter, you have those that are cheering you on so proudly. Your sister is even watching, Molly Croft. Is watching,
I got 4 of them.
even today. So, yeah, she said Peter is an angel. Oh. There are so many people out there like Peter. Love you all. That's just amazing. And I am indeed grateful for each and every one of you who have just told this story. Is there anything else that could be said or that you would like to say to sort of wrap our time together?
I'll just jump in here quickly. I think, Reverend, this is a great sermon when you know, whoever she was had told Michael that it wasn't me walking by him. Is there a time for a white lie, black lie, Scott Peck, all those, you know, the road less traveled? That's a great sermon. No, this is a lot of fun. The last thing is Michael, you know, I did it without telling anybody, did Michael. And then afterward, I was like, all right, well, that was good. And then Michael and I talked about it. We said, we got to get the word out because there might be one or two other donors out there. Right. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Right. Michael, you have one talking about a compassionate one that goes and cares for everyone else. What about you, Michael? Anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say something that actually Dr. Melanson touched on in one of the previous podcasts that we did. People that are on dialysis, that are on the list, wait for a kidney from a cadaver for years. I have a friend that was on the list, and she didn't get hers for 20 years. And when you're on the list and you're waiting, a lot of people die waiting for that kidney. So living donation, again, is the way to go. And I received it, and again, I'm doing great. And I've had both procedures. I've had a kidney taken. I've received a kidney. Having the kidney taken is really, it's a breeze. You're in the hospital for a couple of days, and then you can go and you can live your life. It's not hard at all. And again, like you said, you would be an angel walking this earth. And Peter is a testament to that. So again, if I can influence this one person to go get tested at GWU, then it's been worth it. And that's it. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, this is tremendous. And I will just say that, you know, your living is not in vain. Neither you, Peter, neither you, Michael, or even Dr. Melanson. This is a fabulous story. And if I can tell somebody and help somebody along the way, then my living will not be in vain. That is a powerful hymn and a statement that you all represent. And thank you so very much for this time of rich sharing. And I know that this episode will be reviewed and viewed many, many times. And so I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. And I thank you in particular for your vulnerability. I thank you in particular for sharing your hearts. So thank you. And this has been another wonderful and amazing Kidney Talks with the Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center. Thank you, Dr. Melanson. Thank you, Mr. Peter Ford. And thank you, certainly, Mr. Michael Foster.
Thank you.
And we look forward to the next opportunity and next episode. You want to be there because we have major conversations so that folk can be helped and transformed. And so thank you so very much. Goodbye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.